Let's go ahead and bring in ABC News Chief Global Affairs anchor Martha Raddatz, who's going to be hosting This Week later this morning here on ABC. Martha, good to see you. Let's start with President Trump's threats to Iran. What are your sources saying about how serious those are?
Well, certainly they would look at targets no matter what. There's always a target list, but this is very, very different. Things in Iran are rarely out of control with protests. I've spent a good deal of time in Iran. Those protests are normally pro-regime. Been in the middle of a few of those, but not like this. We saw that a couple of years ago, and they eventually took care of that, and those protests died down. These are really huge, and as Selena said, it is really a remarkable sight. But the question is, what good would bombing do? Now, the regime has really never been threatened with this before, and how they would react. We've heard how they would react, but they really didn't have a reaction 6 months ago when the U.S. and Israel bombed those nuclear sites. So the big question is here, what would they hit? Probably some sort of military targets. And really, would that quell the regime's efforts to stop those violent protests? So this is really something to watch in the coming weeks to see what happens on the ground there, because they are indeed risking their lives every time they go out on those streets in Iran, and the regime is trying to double down and stop them. And then you hear President Trump enter as well.
Yeah, but as you said, stunning images there out of Iran. Martha, let's turn to the ICE shooting in Minneapolis. It appears to be yet another thing dividing this nation. People are seeing the videos very differently depending on politics, right?
They sure are, Gio. And you look at those videos, you look at those different angles, and we've heard from so many people, the line seems stark. We've heard senior U.S. officials, including President Trump and J.D. Vance, say they saw what they saw and that the shooting was justified. And then the other side calling it murder. So there is a very clear divide on what people are seeing in that video and whether they think it is justified. And those protests, as you know, Gio, are growing.
And I know you're going to be covering the law enforcement angle very heavily this morning on This Week. Martha Raddatz, thank you so much. And tune into This Week later. Martha has exclusive interviews with Senator Tina Smith of Minnesota about that deadly ICE shooting in Minneapolis, and with Republican Senator Rand Paul about reining in further U.S. military action in Venezuela.